Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to get a little weird with us today?
Always up for some weirdness.
Well, you came to the right place because today we're diving into Raising Arizona. This movie is like a cult classic.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And it's got this staying power, right? It came out decades ago, but people are still talking about it.
Absolutely. It's so unique. Definitely a one-of-a-kind film.
And we're going to figure out just what makes it so special and so funny, and we've got this fantastic comedy podcast episode to help us break it all down.
Looking forward to it.
So let's jump right in. When you think about Raising Arizona, what comes to mind for you?
Well, I think what strikes me most is how it balances this crazy over-the-top humor with like a surprisingly touching story about family.
Yeah, it really pulls at your heartstrings, even with all the craziness going on.
Right. And it's got that signature Coen brothers style, It's dark, it's quirky, and it's so unpredictable. You never know what's going to happen next. It really makes you think, how did they even come up with this?
It's like they took all these different genres and just threw them in a blender, and somehow it worked.
Exactly.
Huh.
You've got screwball comedy with those rapid-fire jokes and physical humor, but then it's also got elements of a crime thriller.
And even a little bit of romance in there.
Yeah, it's wild. But it all comes together in this really cohesive and engaging way.
The podcast actually used a great analogy to describe it.
Oh, what was that?
They compared it to a fever dream, like the kind you have after eating way too much cheese before bed. It's bizarre and surreal, but also kind of makes sense in its own weird logic.
Haha, that is a perfect way to describe it. The Coens are masters of blending those seemingly opposite elements.
Oh.
And they do it so effortlessly.
And, one of the best examples of that is the bounty hunter, Leonard Smalls.
Oh, man, what a character.
This guy is like pure Coen brothers magic, right? On paper, he sounds terrifying.
Yeah, ruthless biker, the Doberman pincher, the whole 9 yards.
Do you expect him to be this, like, straight-up villain?
Totally. But then you see him on screen.
And he's hilarious.
It's the way they play with expectations. He's still a threat, but he's also this larger-than-life comedic figure.
And it all starts with his entrance. He arrives on this massive motorcycle, dressed head to toe in leather.
Yeah, and that dog, man, that dog is just as intimidating as he is.
You think it's going to be like a scene straight out of a biker movie?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But then he opens his mouth, and he's got this thick southern drawl and this over-the-top intensity that just makes it hilarious. Exactly. It's like they took this classic archetype and twisted it just enough to make it both menacing and absurdly funny.
Yeah, and that's something the Coens do really well, finding that sweet spot between danger and ridiculousness.
Oh, absolutely. They're not afraid to walk that line.
And it's not just with Smalls. They do it with H.I. and Ed's relationship too, right? I mean, on the surface, they are a totally unlikely pair.
You've got Nicolas Cage as H.I., this kind of like manic, impulsive ex-con, and then Holly Hunter is Ed, this grounded police officer.
It's like, how did these two even end up together?
Right. But somehow the Coens make it work.
The podcast pointed out that their contrasting personalities are actually what make their relationship so interesting.
It's funny because you wouldn't expect these two to have any chemistry, but somehow they just click.
And it's not just the comedic side of their relationship either. There are these genuinely sweet moments between them two.
Oh yeah, for sure. The Coens managed to sneak in these moments of tenderness that make you really root for them as a couple.
Yeah, they're flawed. They make some really bad decisions.
Especially that whole kidnapping thing, yeah.
Speaking of, that's where things get really wild, right? Kidnapping a baby, that's not exactly your typical rom-com plot.
No, not at all. But somehow, the Coens managed to make it work, right? At the heart of it, it's about this universal desire to have a family, right?
Yeah, it's coming from a good place, even if their methods are a little questionable.
More than a little, haha. But,
yeah.
You can sympathize with their desperation.
The podcast brought up a really interesting point about how the film plays with our expectations. You go in thinking, okay, this is going to be a serious crime thriller about a kidnapping.
Right.
But then it turns into this wacky, almost farcical spectacle.
Yeah.
You never know what's going to happen next.
It's like they take this serious subject matter and then inject it with this absurdist humor, and it somehow works.
And it's not just the plot itself, it's the characters that bring that absurdity to life, too.
Like the family of the Arizona Quints.
Oh, yeah. They're a whole other level of chaos.
And then you have these supporting characters like the prison warden, Glenn.
He's constantly trying to stop H.I. from escaping.
And he's just as ridiculous as the rest of them. These supporting characters are so important because they create this rich and vibrant world that feels familiar and completely off-kilter at the same time.
It's like they took everyday people and then cranked them up to 11.
Exactly. Every character, no matter how small, adds another layer of humor and depth to the story.
And speaking of adding layers, we got to talk about the visual style of the film.
Oh yeah, it's so distinct, isn't it?
It's like its own character almost.
The podcast mentioned a specific technique the Coens use a lot called long shots.
Ooh, those long shots are amazing.
Yeah, the camera stays fixed on a wide view for like an extended period of time, and it captures these vast landscapes of Arizona.
And it really emphasizes how small the characters are in this big, crazy world. Like that scene where H.I. is walking into the desert after escaping from prison.
Oh yeah, he's just this tiny figure against this huge backdrop.
It's like he's a cartoon character lost in a live-action world.
Exactly. And the Coens are really good at using visual cues like that to heighten the comedic effect. They even use the color palette to create this sense of absurdity. It's all warm, dusty tones, browns, oranges, yellows, which really evokes that feeling of being in the Arizona desert.
It's like you can feel the heat radiating off the screen. You almost need a glass of iced tea just watching it.
Right. It's so immersive.
Right.
And they enhance that immersion even further with the editing. It's fast-paced, with lots of quick cuts and jump cuts.
Keeps you on your toes.
It really does. It creates this sense of energy and chaos that perfectly mirrors the tone of the film. And it adds to the humor, too, you know, like in that scene where H.I. and Ed are trying to hide the baby from the police. It's pure slapstick, and the quick editing just makes it even funnier.
Yeah, it's like a whirlwind of like diapers and baby bottles and panicked expressions.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is how they use sound design to amplify that humor. It's not just the visuals. It's the exaggerated sound effects, the perfectly timed music cues, all of it working together to create this symphony of absurdity.
It's like watching a live-action cartoon unfold in front of you.
Exactly. Like that scene where H.I. is running through the convenience store trying to steal diapers.
Oh, yeah. And the sound effects are just like over the top. It's hilarious.
You can practically hear the cartoon sound effects as he's running around. And that attention to detail is what makes Raising Arizona so rewatchable. You can watch it multiple times and still catch new things.
Little visual gags you didn't notice before, or a funny line that went over your head the first time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's so much packed into every frame. It's a real treasure trove of comedic brilliance. And it's not just the visual spectacle and the humor, you know. There's actually some surprisingly profound themes running through this film, too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, at its heart, Raising Arizona is a story about family and belonging, and that's something we can all connect with, right?
Totally. It's about those deep human desires for connection and love, even if the characters go about it in the most unconventional way possible. I mean, they kidnap a baby, but you can understand their desperation, their longing for a family of their own.
Yeah, I think that's what makes this movie so enduring. It's funny, it's wacky, but it also speaks to these universal human experiences that we can all relate to.
Right. It reminds us that even in the midst of all the chaos and craziness of life, there's still that need for love and connection, that search for belonging. And the Coens managed to explore those themes without being preachy or sentimental. It's all done through their unique blend of humor and absurdity.
Which makes it all the more impactful, I think.
Absolutely. It's like they're saying, hey, life can be messy and unpredictable, but there's also beauty and humor to be found in it all, even in the most unexpected places.
Yeah, and they do it in a way that makes you laugh, and then think, and then laugh again. It's a pretty special film.
It really is.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it makes you wonder how the Coens managed to pull it off. How do they take such a wild premise and turn it into something that's both hilarious and heartwarming? How do they balance that absurdity with genuine emotion? It's a question worth pondering as we continue our deep dive into Raising Arizona. It really is a fascinating balance they strike, and they manage to bring it all together in a way that feels cohesive and satisfying. The Coens, they're masters at finding the humor in the unexpected, even in a story about kidnapping.
Which, let's be real, is a pretty dark subject matter.
Yeah, totally. But they somehow make it work, you know? They find a way to make us laugh at a situation that should be anything but funny.
And they do it by keeping it grounded in something relatable, that desire to have a family.
Right. I mean, who hasn't felt that longing for a family, for a connection? Even if we don't go about it in the same way as H.I. and Ed, we can still understand their motivation.
And I think that's what makes Raising Arizona so effective as a comedy. It's not just about making us laugh, it's about making us feel something too.
Absolutely. And I think that's where the Coens' genius really shines through. They manage to blend humor and heart in a way that few filmmakers can. And speaking of genius, we got to talk about the visual style of this film. It's just as quirky and unforgettable as the characters in the plot.
Oh yeah, it's like stepping into a fever dream. Or a really vivid cartoon.
Exactly. The podcast mentioned the specific technique the Coens use called long shots, where the camera just stays fixed on a wide view for an extended period.
I love those shots. It really emphasizes the vastness of the Arizona landscape.
And makes the characters seem even smaller and more insignificant in comparison, which adds to that comedic effect.
Like that scene where H.I. is escaping from prison and he's running through the desert.
Yeah, he's just this tiny figure against this sprawling backdrop. It's hilarious.
It's like he's an ant lost in a giant sandbox.
Exactly. And the Coens really know how to use those visual cues to heighten the humor. And they use color in such a distinct way, too. Everything is so warm and dusty with lots of browns, oranges, and yellows.
It's like you can feel the Arizona heat just by looking at the screen.
Right. It creates this incredibly immersive experience. And they use the editing to keep things moving at a frenetic pace, which just adds to the chaos and the humor.
Lots of quick cuts and jump cuts.
Yeah, it keeps you on your toes. You never know what's going to happen next. And those quick cuts are perfect for those slapstick sequences. Like that scene where H.I. and Ed are trying to change the baby's diaper and everything just goes wrong.
It's pure chaos, and the editing just makes it even funnier.
It's like a whirlwind of flying diapers and baby powder. And what's amazing is how they use sound design to amplify that humor. It's not just the visuals, it's the exaggerated sound effects, the perfectly timed music cues, all working together to create this symphony of absurdity.
It's like they took a page from classic cartoons, where every action has its own over-the-top sound effect.
Exactly. Like when H.I. is running through that convenience store trying to steal diapers, you can practically hear the cartoon sound effects as he's dodging obstacles and leaping over shelves.
It's hilarious, and it's that attention to detail, those little touches that make Raising Arizona so rewatchable.
Absolutely. There's always something new to discover, a little visual gag you missed before, or a line of dialogue that takes on a whole new meaning. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, there's always something more underneath.
Speaking of layers, I think it's interesting how the Coens managed to weave in these deeper themes amidst all the chaos and absurdity. Like, at its core, Raising Arizona is really a story about family, right?
Yeah, totally. It's about that innate human desire to create a family, to find a sense of belonging. And even though H.I. and Ed go about it in a completely bonkers way, their motivation is something we can all relate to.
Like, yeah, kidnapping is wrong, but you kind of get why they did it.
Yeah, you understand their desperation, their longing for a child. And that's what makes the film so brilliant. You can laugh at the absurdity of the situation, but you also feel for these characters.
You're rooting for them, even though they're breaking all the rules.
Exactly. And that brings us to a really interesting question that the podcast raised, and that is, what makes a family? Is it just about blood ties, or is it something more? Is it about the love and commitment we share, the bonds we create?
Right, because H.I. and Ed, they might not be the most traditional parents, but they clearly love that baby.
They're willing to do anything for him, even risk going back to prison.
So it makes you think about what really matters when it comes to family, right? And I think that's one of the things that makes Raising Arizona so impactful. It's not just a comedy. It's a film that makes you think about those big questions about family, about belonging, about what it means to be human.
And all of that is wrapped up in this hilarious package with quirky characters and unforgettable visuals and over-the-top situations.
It's a wild ride, but it's a ride that sticks with you long after the credits roll.
Absolutely. It's a film that has something to say, but it says it in a way that's both entertaining and thought-provoking.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is what makes it a true Coen Brothers masterpiece. It really makes you appreciate the Coens' skill as filmmakers, how they can take something so absurd and make it so meaningful. It's like they're holding up a funhouse mirror to society, showing us all our quirks and foibles, but doing it with a wink and a smile.
And that's what makes their films so rewatchable. You can catch something new every time, some little detail you didn't notice before.
Right. And the podcast brought up a great point about that. It's easy to get caught up in the humor and the crazy antics, but if you look closer, there's a lot more going on beneath the surface.
Yeah, it's not just about the laughs. It's about those deeper questions they're exploring.
Exactly. Like, what does it really mean to be a family? Is it about blood ties, or is it about something more?
That's a question that comes up a lot in Raising Arizona, with H.I. and Ed going to such extremes to create a family of their own.
And it makes you think about your own definitions of family, your own values.
It's like the Coens are challenging us to examine our own assumptions about what's right and wrong, what's acceptable and what's not.
And they do it in a way that's both funny and thought-provoking. They make you laugh, but they also make you think.
And that's a pretty rare combination, especially in a comedy. So I guess the big question is, what do we take away from all of this? Why does Raising Arizona still resonate with audiences after all these years?
Well, I think it's because it speaks to something universal. It's about that human desire for connection, for belonging, for family. And it reminds us that even in the midst of all the chaos and craziness of life, there's still room for laughter and love.
It's like they're saying, yeah, life can be pretty wild, but we can choose to find the humor in it, the beauty in it, even the absurdity in it.
Exactly. And that's a pretty powerful message, I think, and one that's worth remembering, especially in today's world.
Absolutely. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, explored the humor, the heart, and the cinematic brilliance of Raising Arizona.
It's been a fun ride.
It has. And I hope our listener is inspired to go back and revisit this classic, maybe even with a fresh perspective after all of this discussion. Or if you haven't seen it yet, definitely check it out.
It's a must-see for any Coen Brothers fan
No.
or anyone who just loves a good laugh with a little bit of heart thrown in. And as you watch it, keep this question in mind. How do the Coens use humor and absurdity to explore such profound themes? It's a question that will stay with you long after the movie is over.
That's a great point to leave our listener with. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the wonderful weirdness that is Raising Arizona. Until next time, happy watching.